Aloha. Welcome to Return on Wellness, a web series brought to you by Olympian Meeting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of, I'm going to start that over. I was going to say your show instead of mine. Actually, no, we're going to leave it. This is called Return on Wellness. Wow, amazing out the gate. I am here with Tracy Stuckrath with Eating at a Meeting. I was going to say welcome to Eating at a Meeting, but that's your show, not mine. And we are filming for, I've already been on your show, so I got you to join me.
Almost a year ago.
Yeah, at IMEX, which is coming down the pipe that I don't get to go to this year. I know, I'm bummed. Anyways, I'm very excited to sit down and chat again. We're really excited to talk about, we talk about the 3 M's on this show: mindfulness, movement, and meals. And I cannot think of anyone better to talk to about meals, especially when it comes to events and the return on investment, especially with soaring food and beverage prices. And what I'd like to do is start out with an introduction so people know who you are. And then I'd also like to talk about how Eating at a Meeting got started.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. So Tracy Stuckrath, besides Eating at a Meeting, I own Thrive Meetings and Events, which I started 13 and a half years ago to educate the hospitality industry on how to feed me because I had food allergies. And I was planning 100 events a year and I couldn't eat any of them. And so I was like, okay, let's start doing this. And I started speaking and teaching meeting planners how to choose food options for all their attendees. And it's turned into consulting. And then COVID hit. And actually just before COVID hit, I was shooting some videos for my website. And the videographer was listening to me over and over and over again. And he's like, we were done. He's like, Tracy, you're all things eating at a meeting. I'm like, I like that.
All right. Who was this videographer?
He's in Greenville, South Carolina. Yeah.
What's his name?
I don't have any idea.
Figure it out. Oh, my goodness. So you've built an empire off an idea. Exactly. And you don't even know who to give the credit to. That's fantastic.
I do know who to ask to get the credit to, but and my friend,
when you start making billions of dollars, you need to send him a little thank you.
I do, yes, to say thank you so much for pushing me forward because it's been 3.5 years now.
Well, and the name, right?
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah. And so my friend is like, oh, you need to start a Facebook group, and so I started the Facebook group first, just as COVID hit, and in March of 2020, before everything hit the fan, I was interviewing women for Women's History Month for my blog, and women that were doing really cool and unique things in the industry. And then I started the Facebook group, and I got inundated with speaking gigs right when COVID hit on food safety. And so I just then said, okay, I'm going to do these interviews as Facebook Lives. And it is now 210 episodes in.
Wow.
Yeah, I record every week, interviewing doctors and chefs and farmers and meeting planners and food and beverage directors on what safe, sustainable, and food and beverage experiences are.
Okay. That's a lot.
It is
I do this once a month and it feels like a big lift. So, but you also do them online, so it makes it.
I do record them online, and then I have a producer who strips the audio, or StreamYard actually strips the audio for me. And then we put that on, and it goes out to podcast on your favorite podcast platform every month as well. So
awesome. That's fantastic. I know I enjoyed when I got to join you last year at IMEX.
My producer loves that. He's like, you need to go on site all the time because it was just, you and I were just sitting on the couch like this and people were walking by. I'm like, hey, there's a guy delivering food. Come talk to us.
That was fun. What pop quiz? Do you remember what episode number it was?
No, I should totally know
Okay,
that.
well, we'll put it in the show notes or something.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, tell me, I'm curious, with that many episodes, talking to that many people, and please leave me off the list. What were some of the guests that have really left you with an impression? Have you had some significant aha moments that you maybe didn't see coming?
One, I was actually talking about this earlier this morning that I did. It was for Women's History Month, and I call it Herstory Month. This year was actually these 2 women that I interviewed that started the Women's Craft Fermentation Alliance.
Women's Craft Fermentation Alliance.
And it really doesn't have anything to do with meetings, except for they make drinks that we serve at meetings, right? And they started a conference, they started a group, and they've got women from all over the world who ferment different kinds of drinks, whether it's kombucha or sake. And there's this female sake maker. And in Japan, typically sake makers are male. So I talked to them for an hour and 10 minutes on my podcast because I was so intrigued by what they were doing.
I didn't think you could be a craft brewer unless you had faciel hair.
No, exactly. Yeah.
I thought a twirly mustache was mandatory for...
It is not mandatory.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there's actually in your hometown, a woman, her handle is Puta de la Fruta. Which means, can I cuss on the show?
Yes. Yeah, you can.
Fruit pitch. Or fruit whore. So
fruit whore. Oh, yeah, that's much better.
Yeah.
I can't wait to put this on LinkedIn.
Exactly.
To watch the captions.
Well, her parents are like flabbergasted by that's what her hashtag is, but she works in at a fruit and vegetable distributing company, but she helps make sure that people in the community are fed as well. And so Jamie Gonzalez is her name, and she is just so inspiring in the work that she does. And I think it's just, whether it's a meeting planner or a doctor finding new technologies or finding new information out about food allergies, or chefs, it's just, there's so many things that food touches because we all have to eat. But we take for granted that we do it. Right. And how we serve it.
Now, you mentioned a minute ago, you mentioned three things: safe, sustainable, and
inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Can you go into what you mean by those terms? Because I think it's important to understand. We've touched on food in other episodes, mm-hmm. But I'd like to kind of dig a little deeper on that.
Yeah. Well, safety, we're recording just during Food Safety Awareness Month, so kudos to that. Safety, when you think about it, a lot of times is about the listeria and, salmonella and things like that. And anybody who serves food has to have a food handler card. A restaurant has to have people on staff to do that and manage that. But during COVID, I asked how many meeting planners asked their food and beverage partners about their food safety practices, and 70% said never. And so, because we assume that a hotel or a catering company has their certifications, right? And they know what they're doing, which we should assume that, but it's also a good thing to follow up and ask. But safety also comes around, my tagline that I love to say is that I teach people how not to kill or offend people with the food that they serve. So killing people comes in this form of allergies or making them ill if they've got diabetes or celiac disease. So understanding what the ingredients in your food is, so that comes with that safety aspect.
So to recap it, safety is the pretty basic food handler stuff as well as allergies.
Yeah. And then sustainability wise, meeting plan, this is a 2016 statistic from the Events Industry Council, is that meeting plan...
Sounds like we need a new one.
We do. They just put out a new report, but it didn't contain the food of it. But we spend $64 billion a year in the U.S. on U.S.-based meeting planners. That's how much money we spend. $64 billion. But a majority of that goes to waste. 40% of it goes to waste. And so how can we manage that? And that's really understanding what food functions your attendees are going to be at. Are they going to be at every breakfast, lunch, and dinner and every break? Understanding when they're arriving and departing so that we're not doing that, not over ordering. That's something that we really need to hone in on. But then that excess food, can we not put it in the landfill, but give it to people in need in the community? And there's a lot of organizations out there that can help do that. And the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act from 1990 says that we can donate food, but everybody's like, oh no, we can't do that because we're going to get sued. Well, at the beginning of this year, the Food Donation Improvement Act was signed into law, which actually even gives more safety for those people who are donating practices. You're not going to get sued for it. We need to make sure it's time and temperature controlled, but you can give it to food banks. You can give it to people on the street, because we need to not let that food go to waste, because those people are hungry.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I didn't know about that law coming into effect. I used to plan a lot of meetings in the Bay Area, and there was a group called Food Runners that you would just call after lunch, and they would show up. They would pick up the food, and they would take it and distribute it. It was great.
Yeah.
Do you by any chance have I don't know if you've collected this. I know there's various companies that have tried to do it on a larger scale. You haven't by any chance compiled a list of, like, depending on where your event is, who you can call?
I have a short list of them. There is, I actually, in my Eating in a Meeting Facebook group, somebody was asking for some in the Phoenix area. And so I've just posted a couple of them on that post in that. But Food Rescue US is one. They're in probably about 15 to 20 states across the US that you can partner with. They were not in Phoenix or Arizona, so that's why I went looking for some other ones. Eat Greater Des Moines is another organization. Aubrey Alvarez, who founded that, was on my show last year. And actually, I was just sharing the story today as well, is that she met my friend Sarah at the La Dame de Escoffier conference last year. And
I'm not going to pretend to know.
I know. It's an organization of women in hospitality, food, and beverage.
Oh, okay.
And so we have chapters all across the globe. But Aubrey at Eat Greater Des Moines had started community fridges. And we've seen a lot of those come up around the country. But Sarah in Chatham County, North Carolina, which is Pittsboro area, meeting Aubrey inspired her, and she just opened her own. And she's partnering with the food, the farmers market, and different restaurateurs. So any leftover food that they have, they can go put in the fridge, and then the fridge is there for people to just take food if they need it.
So I think one of the things that planners will get pushback from, because there's a reason these laws have to keep getting one-upped.
Right.
And maybe you have some advice on this. If someone approaches a hotel and says, we want to donate whatever's left from our meeting to divert it from the landfill, and the hotel says, well, we can't do that. How do you frame that conversation instead of saying, well, yes, you can, and here's the law as to why?
Right.
Like, how can you help proactively and politely educate the hotel that they sure as shit can, and they better do it, without being as abrasive as I naturally am?
First, show them the law. But there was a really good story in one of the industry publications that really epitomizes what happens, or what you should do is you should go find that organization yourself. And not that meeting planners have time to do that, but it is, like in my Facebook group, they were trying to find the organization because they were getting pushback from the hotel. So find the organization that's willing to come and pick up the food, maybe supply the tins for them to put the food in, and just walk that property through the steps that they will do to rescue that food. And it really, the Food Donation Improvement Act does allow those organizations to charge the fee, the cost that they incur for those tins, whether it's the hotel or the nonprofit picking it up. So you can get the money back from that, because that is probably another one of the costs. But the other thing too is, I think, the staffing issue of making sure that they've got the staff to do that rescue aspect of taking it out of a chafing dish and putting it into the tin.
Right.
So I think the biggest step is to go find the organization in that town that can help them.
Okay.
And that story that I read, that convention center is now partnering with that nonprofit all the time to do that.
Good. Do you also go into the sustainability aspect of distance and sustainably sourced food and things of that nature?
We do, and I do, and it's really looking at the distance of how far you're ordering it from, and talking to those chefs. Sometimes it's hard to get to the chefs, but asking, hey, who do you source from locally? Are you using local producers? But it depends on where your property is and what time of year it is, because the distance could be 100, it could be 150, it could be 500. And one chef that I talked to, and I loved his philosophy. He's like, my first choice is local organic. The second choice is organic. and then regional organic, and then regional, and then nationwide. But he doesn't really want, and he doesn't want to source anything from outside the United States, which is kind of hard for some things. But that's a good philosophy to use. But I think, and it depends on how large your event is, because if you're doing a party an event for 17,000 people, it's highly unlikely you're going to be able to feed everybody within a 100-mile radius.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we covered safety, sustainability, and I like this one, which is the, and I had it, and then I said, I like this one, and then I lost it. Was it inclusion?
Yep. Inclusion.
Okay.
Yep. So, and then another one of my guests recently said compassionate as well. And I really like the combination of inclusive and compassionate. But it really is when you and I sit down at a table and we have paid registration fee to attend an event, and whether we were asked or not, if they don't have anything for me to eat, I don't feel included in that conversation, in that meal, especially if we were a table of 10, table of 6 or whatever, and you and I are about to land a deal, right? I'm hungry. I'm thinking about not being able to eat. Maybe I haven't eaten all day because I've been in business meetings and whatever, but it's making sure everybody has a seat at the table, and it's also making sure that everybody has access to get to that table is part of my inclusion aspect too, because individuals who utilize wheelchairs or have walkers or visually impaired, how do they participate in that food function as well? Because we need to be able to make sure they get to that seat and they have something to eat that is safe for them, is not offensive to them. Because if it's in the middle of Ramadan, right, and you're serving lunch, that person's not going to be eating lunch, right?
Right.
They don't eat lunch until sunset, right? So how do you make sure that we're creating that experience so that everybody feels included in that food function?
Yeah, and I've experienced this go wrong for me. I've talked about this before. We had a marketing offsite. It was right after it's like our first get together after the pandy. That's what I call it now. Somebody told me that term, and I'm going to use it forever now. The pandy.
All right.
And I saw 2 people leaving, and they're walking out of the hotel, and I was like, "Hey, is everything all right?" And they're like, "Yeah, we don't have anything to eat." And I could not have felt worse about myself.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, I'm rusty. I haven't done this in a minute. Like we messed up." Because now they're 80-90% of the teams in this room breaking bread together.
Yeah.
And they had to go somewhere else and go eat and probably talk about what a terrible human being I was. At least that's what my guilt complex is going to tell me they were doing.
Yeah.
Do you think inclusivity goes even beyond, and this is me kind of pushing my own dietary restrictions that are self-selected? Do you think it goes beyond just I think you don't ever have to, most meeting planners, you can say, in the registration, do you have any food allergies?
Right.
And that's kind of about the extent of where it goes. But some people want to eat a certain way.
Right.
Be it low carb, no carb, or another lesson I learned is when I worked at 24-Hour Fitness.
Okay.
I would have people who were coming to a meeting, and they were going to be on a cheat day when they were there.
Yep.
And they wanted the junk food. And if they didn't, I had someone say one time, "Thank you for having stuff for me to eat. Today's my cheat day.
Right.
If I hadn't, I probably would have lost my mind." But on the flip side of that, some people are trying to do the opposite of that.
Right.
So I think it's really about building a menu that gives people agency.
Yep. It's building a menu that meets a variety of different needs and lets people pick and choose what they want.
Right.
But there's a lot that comes with that. For a meeting planner, majority of hotel menus are not labeled. But then again, then a lot of chefs are like, well, 80% of the menus that I put together are custom menus. Like, well, if I can't afford for you to do the custom menu for you or, pay you for that, or I've negotiated 10% off my menus as long as I order off the printed. I can't eat, which is a whole nother negotiation thing that we need to work on. But if nothing's labeled on the menu, it's really hard for a planner to pick that. And especially if it's a newbie planner that they don't know they can go to the chef and do that. So, I just went, I was ordering food for an event and I was looking at the appetizers and just doing what I do. I coded the appetizers. And
What do you mean you coded them?
I went through and say, okay, just by reading it, which ones of these are gluten-free? Which ones of these contain shellfish? Which ones of these contain dairy? Out of 30 appetizers, one was gluten-free, dairy-free. Because everything had cheese on it or milk in it or whatever, right? And everything had wheat or bread or something in it. And I'm like, okay, well, and I also have this person who's shellfish allergy or whatever. So it really is asking questions to the chefs. And I did find out from that chef, well, we order them all from an outside caterer. And so he has no control of he should, but that outside caterer then again is not catering it. But I think it's hard. And you showed me a video earlier today about a chef at Canyon Ranch. She's like, okay, well, we're trying to figure out the nutritional things of this. And well, we don't want to use almonds because they're fattier, but pistachios have the same amount of protein, but are not as fatty. But not all chefs know that. And actually listening to a nutritionist years ago from Tulane, and he said, and they're partnering with Johnson and Wales now because chefs are not taught nutrition in culinary school, and nutritionists are not taught how to cook.
Very true.
So there's
someone who has eaten a lot of meal prep. That is very true.
Yes, and so there's a lot of disconnect, and then we're putting this on meeting planners and then hotel chefs. Not to discount that they work at a hotel, but they're producing thousands of meals a day. When do they have the time to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
Or go to school for that?
Yeah. I think at first, this conversation sounds immensely intimidating to someone they're like, holy crap, I didn't even think about this. How do you, because I think one of the things that planners have faced that we've all been trying to get better at is how to ask the question around food. Some people, you can tell what the planner's tolerance level is usually like by how the dietary restrictions are worded. They're like, please list your medically required dietary restrictions, basically saying, I just don't want to get sued, but you're going to eat whatever I give you.
Right.
Do you have any ideas on how you could word that question in a way that promotes that inclusivity, so that if there's someone who just wants to eat a certain way,
right,
or someone who has dietary restriction or that kind of thing, is there a way that you can word that is a little more attendee friendly?
So I like to split it up in two aspects. The medically necessary, I put under the Americans with Disability, the question about how can we make our event more inclusive?
Because I think we gotta ask this during reg, right? So we understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So during registration form, if you're designing your registration form, we welcome people of all abilities to our event. Please share with us how we can make your experience as inclusive as possible, right? And so that question is, do we need to provide any accessibility help you with accessibility needs? And I actually like to say mobility, vision, hearing, and then food. Because just so y'all know, food allergies and celiac disease are deemed a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Is it a big enough one that you get a parking plaque?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well,
No.
Figured I'd ask.
No, we can't do that because parking and food don't have anything together due to each other. But
sorry, I don't mean to make light of disabilities, but
yeah,
I figured
it does not. And the majority of people aren't going to do it because they don't want to be a burden. That's one of the things with people with food allergies, for meeting planners to understand, is we don't want to be a burden. And when somebody comes up and says, oh, hey, oh my God, you're the vegan, or that's not a food allergy, but you're the person who has peanut allergy and now I can't eat peanuts the entire event, right? Or a plane ride, right? We don't want to be that burden, but we want to be included in this event and have something safe to eat. But it's like, how can we make make this event more inclusive to you? So do you have food allergies or other medically necessary diets, right? And then ask the questions of food allergies. I would list at the minimum the top 9 food allergies. Let me tell you what those are.
Yeah, let's break it down.
Okay, fish and shellfish.
Those are 2.
Those are 2 different
Right.
ones.
Yep.
Peanuts and tree nuts.
Yep.
Soy, milk, sesame, egg, and wheat.
Okay.
So that's the top 9. And sesame became the 9th one in January. That has to be labeled on packaged food, and that's a whole nother story that we need to talk about on a different episode. But so list at least the top 9 and then put other, and then also allow people to pick 2, because somebody could be allergic to milk and also be allergic to wheat. A wheat allergy is different than celiac disease. So I would definitely separate those out. And then say, are there any other dietary practices that we can help you maintain while you're here? Vegan, vegetarian.
Dietary practices. I like it.
Yep. And somebody could be vegan for medical reasons. So we don't want to discount that. But then there's kosher and halal and other religious-based practices that we need to accommodate. And I actually have an event that I've done for 2 years now, and I have 3 different people who are kosher, who follow kosher practices. And one is an Orthodox Jew, and so she's very strict. And the first event I did with her was during Passover, and she had never traveled for Passover for work before. So managing that. And then the other 2 were like, we'll eat off the buffet as long as you label for pork and shellfish and meat and dairy.
So did you reach out to those people?
I did. I picked up the phone.
Yeah. I think because we all know that kosher and halal meals are sometimes a heavy lift.
Yeah. And I think halal, you can get away with the hotel chef preparing. If you follow some practices, it doesn't have to be, depending on the level of practice, it doesn't have to be certified halal. But the kosher, like that person who's Orthodox Jew wants that stricter, they want that certified kosher meal that gets delivered to them all sealed, and don't unseal it before you give it to them.
Never unseal it.
Never unseal it. Yeah.
Well, I've ordered kosher on planes. I'm 51% Ashkenazi Jew.
Okay.
I found out a few years ago. I actually participated in my first Seder last year. So I preface this before what I say what I say. I always kind of said, well, kosher is like the original organic because of the requirements around it. So I've ordered it a couple times on the plane, because then I know that the ingredients are going to be a little cleaner. I'm going to be able to, and it's the click of a button on a plane. So I don't feel like it's a big deal that they have to go get some, they're already prepared for it. They have that in their supply chain. Mm-hmm. And they always ask, they say, would you like me to bring it to you sealed, or can we open it for you?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's a totally acceptable question.
Yeah, but then you also have people who are kosher and have food allergies, right? So how do you? That's the whole other thing.
But that's why you get those 2.
Exactly.
That's a great way of breaking it down.
Because some people are like, how do you know if it's an intolerance or a food allergy? And I'm like, that really shouldn't be matter to you, right? They have this request. We're providing it for you. How can we make that safer? But I think picking up the telephone and asking those questions is really, really important when you've got, and I've gotten people with a whole page of, I can't eat this food, right? And that is definitely picking up the conversation and saying, what can you eat? What do you like to eat? That's another really important question with individuals who have a longer list. And I think the chefs are, I'm going to say all of them are, but not all of them are open to creating menu items for it.
Almost always. I've never met a chef where I'm like, hey, you have creative privilege. What do you want to do? I've never met one that's like, I want to make the same thing on the menu I've made 1,000 times. I want to touch on a little bit on faux healthy foods. Where things like plant-based meat substitutes. I'd love to know, and I said faux healthy, you did not. So if we have a difference in opinions, I'm okay with that.
Oh, no, I agree with you.
Okay. All right.
Wholeheartedly.
There's a lot of people that are like, oh, beef is bad and blah, blah, blah. And we should be doing these other things. Are you seeing any, I'm calling it wellness washing around any certain foods? And the reason I talk about plant-based meat is all you have to do is look at the nutritional facts on the back of it, and you'll see, one, it's loaded with chemicals. And two, the amount of fat that is in that fake meat is, and I get it. I understand why they did it.
Make it taste like the original thing.
Right. And the jury is out on lab-created meat, which I'm sure you've heard about.
Yep. It's the FDA or the USDA or FDA just gave approval for a couple chickens.
Yeah, where they're making from like actual animal cells. Mm-hmm. So I'll be curious to see what the nutritional. What are some of those trends that you're seeing that people should be on the lookout for?
Well, I mean, the plant-based meat, I would rather you not serve those. I would rather the chef come up with their own quinoa bean burger instead. There's a lot of faux products out there. And I just think about when you go to the grocery store, right? Everything on the perimeter of the grocery store is in its natural state.
That's usually where they put the fake meat, though.
Well, that is true. Yeah, very true, actually. So
smart marketing.
Very smart marketing because, hey, this is meat. But everything in the middle of the grocery store is that ultra processed. And I've been schooled on this a couple of times from a different dietitians, Nina Curtis, who I adore, out of California. Like a can of chickpeas is processed, right? Because we clean them and process them, we put them in a can. But thinking about the ultra processing of that, these faux meats, those are ultra processed. They've got a lot of chemicals and a variety of things in them. But what's the water content? Water usage of sustainability wise. And I just think, can we recreate them using natural foods is my better option. And it's healthier for everybody. I mean, a Twinkie is a Twinkie and a Twinkie is going to last 100 years. So,
that's delicious.
And it is good. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't have these things there, but limit them. And I don't know, you asked me what trends are coming up, and I think it's still out there, though, using those things, because I also think it's easier.
Yeah.
Right. And in an industry that is lacking in staff right now, in the back of the house and the front of the house, that might be the easier option to do. But I don't know. I mean, the chicken, I know Jose from what's his name? Jose. He goes and does the food rescue or the food.
Is it Jose Garces?
Yeah, that he's got his restaurant in DC, and he got approval to use that lab chicken in his restaurant. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So,
and if you guys want more
World
information,
National Kitchen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's doing.
You can Google it, but basically they're recreating it from the cells. They're not actually creating an animal, or they're not using an animal to do it. So
right, but they're using the cells from an animal, so it's not vegan.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's still the animal proteins.
Yeah.
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 So I think one of the things I'd like to transition, we have some time here, is I want to talk about the impact making these efforts has on attendees' feelings. I mean, that we're all trying to get more out of less, and that my mission with this series was to help people drive stronger ROI from events, and get higher KPI scores,
right,
and be able to, jump on the inflation bandwagon and charge more for your tickets because
right,
they're the must-have. It's the must-go-to conference or whatever. If it's your internal meeting,
right,
happy employees,
yep,
whatever it may be, that's the mission of this is taking these steps to incorporate wellness into your events to drive those scores.
Right.
When it comes to food, it's a third of our mindfulness movement and meals. You've met with nutritionists and chatted with them. You've met with plenty of planners as well, and you've done it yourself. I mean, you keep inclusion in there. I want to talk about how taking these steps impacts an event attendee's experience. So we can talk about, because I think it's a multifaceted. I see it as two sides. There's a biological impact of what you feed people, and there is a psychological impact of what you
and
feed.
Emotional, if you want to throw that in as a third, where that, yeah.
I was kind of lumping that in with psychological.
Yeah.
But let's not try to attack them both at once. You can pick which one. Let's talk about both of them though, because I think it is a key pillar to this whole thing.
So 2 stories come to mind that really come to mind off the top of my head. My friend Kathy went to a conference. She works for a state organization. She paid the full registration fee. She cannot have pork. She's allergic to pork and she's allergic to gluten. She went. I believe they asked about dietary needs in the registration form. She could eat maybe one thing at every single function that they attended. And she, because she works for a state organization, to go outside and get food elsewhere, she's not going to get reimbursed for that food because food came with the registration fee.
Right.
So she will not be able to add that to her thing. So it frustrated her to beyond belief. And actually, she's one of my sorority sisters, and another sorority sister went to a different event, and her friend has celiac disease, and she said she couldn't eat anything. And what do you do? And she's like, would you please go talk to this organization? And I reached out to that organization, and she's like, they didn't really answer how they manage it because it was a new event planner. So I can't fault her for not knowing that, but they're also limited on the amount of money they can spend. But thinking about it thoroughly, it just makes them unengaged, because they're hungry. It's that psychological effect of that. They're emotionally unattached to what they're learning, and then they're having to fork out more money. So I think, and so they don't do that. And then I have this event that I did years ago for SPIN, Senior Planners Industry Network.
Yep.
And this woman wrote in that she was allergic to apples. And she was so allergic that she had an anaphylactic reaction to eating a banana that was in a bowl that apples were in the day before.
Wow.
Right. So it was on the skin. And I talked to the chef, and I talked to the Sean Asuko who organized it. And I said, we're eliminating all apples from the store except for, your iPhones, right? And your laptops. And we eliminated apple cider vinegar. We eliminated everything from that meeting. And the MC made a comment about it at the very beginning and said, please don't bring apples or anything with apples to the meeting space, not the hotel, just the meeting space. And her email to me is like, you have no idea how grateful I am to be able to come to this event and to fully participate, without being scared of potentially going to the hospital. And so and I have countless stories of people who are like, one woman's boss, she's like, well, we'll do it for you for this time. We'll order you the gluten-free pizza, but not next time. You have to bring your own food. So what does that say to the employee, right? You're feeding everyone here, but you're not willing to feed me and have me be included in that event and in that company event. So are they going to, how engaged are they going to be in producing work for you?
Yeah, I can't wait to see that survey score.
Exactly. And there's so much opportunity, and there's just some statistics out there. Shandy Chernow, who owns, her company name's going to come to me in a minute. She owns a company that is a platform behind the scenes that allows restaurants to label their food for the guests to read it. Like, so you can plug in your allergies, and it'll say, okay, green light this dish, red light this dish, and things like that. And her statistics show that a food allergic person's bill is 38% less on average than a non-food allergic person's bill. So, and then some statistics from Gluten-Free Passport and Allergy-Free Passport shows that individuals who have food allergies or celiac disease or any kind of dietary restriction, I'm going to say, are 91% more likely to come back to your restaurant, your establishment, if they have a great dining experience. So if you can get them back 91% of the time, and you can increase their sales by what they're offering, then it's money in your pocket.
those are really strong statistics.
Yeah.
And think about that when you're thinking about your post-event survey, or if it's a conference that people are buying tickets to.
Right.
Because I think psychologically, emotionally,
Right.
is even stronger than the biological reaction.
Right.
So I think we all know it sucks to be hangry,
Right.
which is what happens if you don't eat. But I'd love to touch on some of the foods that you can offer, because the truth of the matter is there's a lot of foods out there that will enhance people's ability to learn and remember things and things of that nature. So I'd love if you have some tips or some information you've learned from any of the nutritionists on how you can help your attendees get more out of their food.
Yeah. I mean, it's really thinking about, there's and Shandy's company just came to my mind at Certistar. So I'm going to say that, make sure that that's out there. But looking at your nuts and your seeds, your blueberries, your salmon, those are foods that are actually going to engage your attendees. Feeding them a continental breakfast with all pastries that are sugar and wheat and sugar and wheat
And sugar.
Are not the ways to engage your attendees, because when and I actually had this experience when I first got diagnosed and I was not supposed to have sugar. You eat sugar and you get on this high, and you might not know it if you eat sugar a lot, but if you haven't had it in a while and you eat sugar, you get this euphoria, right? And you're excited, but then you're going to crash. And I bawled my eyes out like an hour later. I'm like, oh my God, what, and not that that's everybody's experiences, but when you're feeding people at an event, feeding them those high carb, sugar laden foods throughout the day, they are going to crash, which means they're going to fall asleep in your education session, which they paid to come to learn from you, and they're not going to get it, right? Because they're not going to be attuned to, they're not going to be able to be focused. So if you can think of serving foods that are a lot fresher in their natural state, not laden with heavy creams or sugar on them. Cut the portion sizes, because the other thing about the amount of food that we eat is that we're overfed, but we're undernourished, because a lot of the food that we serve is not nutrient dense, it's nutrient empty.
And caloric heavy.
I
want you said, what was it? Nutrient
dense.
No, caloric heavy and nutrient
empty. Yeah.
That's going to be the title of the episode.
And it really, because you have to think, you want the good nutrients in there so that our bodies are doing the things that they need to do to make us alert and make us want to learn and meet new people and do things. And so, but when we're lethargic because we've just eaten too much food because of the portion sizes that we're given, or that we're constantly eating as well. Diana Rogers was just on my show, and she has a book and a movie called Sacred Cow. And it's the case for better meat and looking at the nutrient density of meat versus this whole plant-based default veg, which we got to merge those together.
Right.
And, but she's like, if you get the right nutrients in your body at the very beginning, you can go until lunch without being hungry, right? You don't need that need for snacking.
Right.
And which will kill our food and beverage budgets. But, focus on better food at breakfast. And she's a dietitian. So she's like, focus on better meals that are nutrient dense so that you can sustain your time until the next meal and you're not hungry and craving, because those sugar-laden caloric foods are making us crave more of it.
I heard something really interesting from a coworker of mine. That was, he said, it's a guy on our engineering team, and he said he suffers from really bad ADHD. Mm-hmm. And when he either has a protein shake in the morning or just has protein for his breakfast, and I'm trying to find some real science on it. I've found a lot of blogs and whatnot. So if there's anybody out there doing this research, please send it this way, he doesn't find himself having to take his meds.
Read Sacred Cow. I was listening to it on the way here.
So I want to pause for a second here. Someone with ADHD, attention deficient, hyperactive disorder, meaning they can't focus, they can't sit still, etc. When they have protein for breakfast, I'm saying this again for dramatic effect, he doesn't have to take his meds and he can focus better.
Yep.
How much did you spend on that keynote speaker? 25, 50 grand.
Yep.
To come in and wow everybody. And then what did you feed them before they go into that room? Like, we have to think about, because you could literally have someone who wouldn't get any benefit from that versus get all the benefit of that because of the food that you chose.
Right. And you're the one responsible for choosing the food for them. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We spend $64 billion a year on it in meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to really drill that point home.
Yeah.
Food is so much more about, it's about so much more than just making sure there's something out.
Yeah.
I had an attendee once. She came from London and she's like, thank you for not feeding me everything beige. Because we had salads and fruit and whatnot. Okay, we don't have a lot of time left here, so we're going to do our little rapid fire.
Okay.
Just two things. You can be as controversial as you want. Okay. The last one, Julius said, we're going to ask two questions. Julius Solaris, I'm sure you know who he is. He called out the event mafia, which I didn't even know was a thing. I was like, oh, okay. So that's two questions is, what do we need to stop? Like, if you could wave a magic wand and just say, no, stop doing that, what would it be? And two, what is the thing that needs more attention on it? Like, what's the thing that, like, everybody should know, but nobody seems to be realizing it? So,
okay,
the negative one's always easy.
Okay.
Usually.
Well, my first big one, because it's been a topic of conversation, is we need to stop charging $199 for gallons of coffee, plus tax and gratuity. So it turns out to be a cup of coffee is $21 a cup. Starbucks is cheaper, but we don't have Starbucks in every hotel. So whatever hotel company you work for, do not charge it. Meeting planners, before you sign that contract at the hotel, put that in your concessions, that you will only pay $85 for a cup of coffee, for a gallon of coffee, or $100.
Call out your coffee pricing in your RFP.
Yeah, so that means you need to ask for your menus before you sign the hotel contract.
Love it.
Yeah,
that is a super. It's literally a hot take because it's coffee.
It is.
Or how about $199 for
the gallon of water? Yes.
For tea.
Yes. So pay for tea bags purchased like you do a bag of chips. It's only by consumption for tea bags and not for the gallon of water that has just only been heated, because they're charging $199 for that. So that plus. That has to stop. And then what was the other question?
The other one was like, what's something that you've either heard about or seen someone doing that's not getting enough attention? So that might be a twofer though.
Right. Well, it's kind of there's two things there. It comes with the safety and the sustainability, is we have to focus on the labeling of our food and knowing because the front of the house is responsible for labeling it and the back of the house is responsible for making it, and they're not communicating. And they need that front of house staff needs to be empowered, needs to know what they're serving, because they're serving you and it could be life or death for you.
And they're the ones that get the question on the line.
Exactly.
Because when someone's like, oh, does this blah, 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 because it's not.
They have no idea.
And they're like, I got to go ask the chef. And then that person has to stand there for 10 minutes.
Well, and some of the servers don't speak English. And I met a group of people the other day that their entire, in that city, everybody at the convention center speaks Burmese. So the BEOs are not written in that language. So how do the servers know what to do?
Right.
And then the other one is, my friend Aurora Dawn Benton pointed this out to me, is the prolifically problematic foods that we serve. And there's a podcast episode on it. Don't know the number. I'll find out yours too. But the prolifically problematic foods are all of those pastries that get served and then get ditched because they're not eating. So watch what you're serving and watches what is not eaten and do not order that again. But it's bagels and pastries and extra butter and charcuterie trays. You'd be amazed at how much of that gets thrown away. And those things are expensive. Crudité gets thrown away. But how can you be more fun with the crudité and not waste as much? So those are my third
Put it
things.
in aprons. Did you and Liz and Nicole talk about the apron thing?
Yes, we did.
That's
Thank you
another.
for that.
Yeah. That was on my first episode and on your last episode.
Exactly.
So, okay. Well, that is it. That's a wrap for us. That was. I knew it was going to fly by. I think I saw like 3 questions that we didn't even get to. So
we can talk about it later.
Yeah, we can always do another one. So awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And yeah, we will see.
And he and I have some things that we're going to collaborate on. So pay attention.
Yeah. Be on the lookout. We had plenty of time to conspire prior to this.
Exactly.
So, okay. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome, Dave. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining Return on Wellness. For help integrating these ideas, please scan the QR code. We sincerely hope you join us for our next episode of Return on Wellness.